Have you ever wondered how far people would go for land and wealth in the untamed American frontier? The lengths some families would travel down dark paths, manipulating their own flesh and blood, all for a few more acres of fertile soil. Before you continue watching this video, comment where you're from, and please subscribe to help our channel continue sharing these hidden historical horrors that mainstream historians refuse to acknowledge. In the autumn of 1890, the small farming community of Blackthorn Hollow, Iowa, faced an unprecedented series of disappearances that would forever haunt the collective memory of the region. The case began when local land registry clerk Thomas Whitfield noticed irregularities in ownership transfers across 3 counties. What started as a routine audit soon unraveled into one of the most disturbing cases of familial manipulation and calculated disappearances in American history. The Caldwell family had established themselves as respectable farmers in eastern Iowa sometime around 1865, shortly after the Civil War. Patriarch Jeremiah Caldwell, his wife Margaret, and their 2 oldest children, Samuel and Rebecca, were known as hard-working, church-going folks who kept to themselves. Few questioned when the family announced the birth of twins, a boy and girl named Isaac and Isabel, in 1872, though the local midwife noted that Margaret had shown few signs of pregnancy in the months prior. The explanation given, that Margaret had been bedridden and rarely left their remote farmhouse, was accepted without much scrutiny in those days, before formal birth records were rigorously maintained. The investigation would later reveal that the twins were not Caldwell children by birth. County records from a neighboring state indicated that an orphanage in western Illinois had reported 2 infant twins missing that same year. The matron's journal, discovered in 1892 during the subsequent investigation, contained a disturbing entry. 2 visitors from Iowa inquired about our newest arrivals, the twin infants surrendered by the McAllister girl. By morning, both cribs were empty. God have mercy on those innocent souls. For 18 years, Isaac and Isabel were raised in near isolation on the Caldwell farm. Neighbors reported that the children were rarely seen in town, with Jeremiah claiming they were delicate in constitution and required special care away from others. The few who encountered the twins described them as unusually quiet, pale, and seemingly devoid of the normal vivacity of youth. They were educated at home, with Margaret allegedly teaching them reading and arithmetic, while Jeremiah instructed them in the family's peculiar interpretation of scripture and law. "I only saw them maybe 3 times in all those years," recalled Eleanor Jenkins, who operated the general store in Blackthorn Hollow. "Always together, always wearing matching clothes despite being brother and sister. Their eyes had this empty look, like they weren't really seeing what was in front of them. Whenever I tried to engage them in conversation, they'd just look to each other, as if seeking permission to speak. Most unsettling children I ever encountered." Reverend Howard Miller, who served the local Methodist congregation during this period, documented his concerns in personal correspondence found after his death in 1910. "The Caldwell twins attended service today for the first time in perhaps 5 years. They sat rigid as boards between their parents, speaking to no one, acknowledging no greetings. I approached Jeremiah after the service to express my concern for their spiritual welfare, suggesting the young people might benefit from fellowship with others their age. His response chilled me to the bone. Their purpose in this life has been ordained since before their birth. They have no need for the distractions of ordinary companionship." What was this purpose Jeremiah spoke of? According to the investigation that unfolded in late 1890, the Caldwells had orchestrated an elaborate scheme involving the twins, multiple false identities, and land acquisition across 3 counties. Land registry documents revealed that between 1888 and 1890, Isaac and Isabel had separately married 4 individuals each, 8 marriages in total, all of whom were heirs to substantial landholdings. In each case, The new spouse would transfer property rights to their Caldwell partner only to disappear shortly thereafter. The methodology was meticulous. Isaac and Isabel would adopt different surnames, provided by their parents through forged documentation, and travel to neighboring counties to court land-rich individuals who lived in isolation, widows, widowers, and orphaned heirs who had little family to protect their interests. The twins had been trained since childhood to present themselves as charming, pious individuals seeking a simple farming life. Their practiced mannerisms and rehearsed life stories convinced these vulnerable targets to enter into hasty marriages. One such victim was Eleanor Blackwood, a 23-year-old who had inherited her father's 200-acre farm near the county line. According to her neighbor, William Hayes, Eleanor met this young man, who called himself Isaac Smith, at a harvest festival. Within 3 weeks they were married by a traveling preacher. I thought it peculiar how quickly it happened, but Eleanor seemed happy enough, said he was gentle, and spoke beautifully of building a life together. 2 months later, Eleanor was gone. He told everyone she'd fallen ill and gone to stay with relatives in Minnesota, sold the farm not a week after she disappeared. What made the scheme particularly effective was the twins' ability to transform their appearances. Isabel was documented to have presented herself as both blonde and brunette to different suitors, while Isaac alternated between being clean-shaven and heavily bearded. They had been taught to modify their accents, mannerisms, and personal histories. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to have no moral qualms about their actions, suggesting years of psychological conditioning by their parents. Martha Wilson, who briefly worked as a housemaid for the Caldwells in 1887, provided testimony that shed light on the family's methods. "I wasn't supposed to go into the east wing of the house, but one night I heard strange sounds like someone crying. I found a room where the twins were sitting while their father stood over them, making them repeat these strange phrases over and over. 'The land is all that matters. Your purpose is greater than yourself. Attachments are weaknesses to be overcome.' When they made mistakes, Mrs. Caldwell would ring this little silver bell, and they'd flinch, something terrible. I left that house the next morning and never went back." The land accumulation might have continued undetected had Thomas Whitfield not noticed a pattern in the registry records. 8 different couples, in 3 different counties, all following the same pattern: marriage, property transfer, disappearance of the original owner. The common denominator was that one spouse in each couple bore a striking physical resemblance to either Isaac or Isabel Caldwell, though under different names. When authorities began investigating in October 1890, the Caldwell farm was found abandoned. The house had been emptied of personal belongings, though the barn contained a disturbing discovery: a collection of personal effects seemingly belonging to the missing spouses, wedding rings, pocket watches, letters and journals, carefully organized and labeled in 8 separate trunks. There were no human remains found on the property, despite extensive searching of the grounds and nearby areas. The most chilling evidence came from a leather-bound ledger discovered hidden beneath a floorboard in Jeremiah Caldwell's study. Inside was a detailed record of each marriage, property acquisition, and dissolution, as he clinically referred to the disappearances. Alongside these entries were calculations of property values, projected financial gains, and future targets. The final page contained a map of the newly acquired properties, which, when viewed together, formed an almost perfect circle around a location marked only with a strange symbol resembling an eye within a triangle. "I have never, in 20 years of law enforcement, encountered such cold-blooded calculation," wrote Sheriff James Montgomery in his official report. This was not a crime of passion or desperation, but a meticulous plan executed over decades, beginning with the acquisition of 2 infant children, for the express purpose of turning them into instruments of fraud and worse. The fate of the missing spouses remained undetermined. Some investigators believed they had been murdered and buried in locations yet to be discovered, while others suggested they might have been transported elsewhere, possibly to work on other properties owned by the Caldwells under conditions of servitude or imprisonment. The absence of bodies made prosecution difficult, even if the perpetrators could be found. From the journal of Rebecca Caldwell, the eldest daughter, found in a Chicago boarding house in 1891. I can no longer bear the weight of my complicity in Father's grand design. Though I left the farm 5 years ago, the nightmares persist. I see the faces of those poor souls lured into our family's web. I hear the muffled sounds from the root cellar that Mother always explained away as settling foundations or animal disturbances. I was 16 when they brought the twins home, already knowing their intended purpose. "They are clay to be molded," Father said that night. "God has delivered them into our hands as instruments of our ascension." I watched those children grow without joy or natural affection, shaped by my parents' relentless conditioning. By 12, they could recite property law better than scripture. By 15, they could change their identities as easily as changing clothes, adopting new names, histories, and mannerisms without hesitation. What chance did they have to develop consciences when their every waking moment was directed toward the fulfillment of my father's obsession? The land, always the land. Father believed the original survey of Iowa contained a secret geography, that certain properties held special power when owned together. The pattern he sought to complete, that perfect circle of farms around the convergence point, as he called it, consumed his every thought. What he intended once the circle was complete, I dare not contemplate. I am writing this confession knowing that I may not live to see justice done. I've seen Father's associates in the city, watching my movements. The family's reach extends further than anyone suspects. If this journal is found after my death, let it serve as testimony to the evil that men can conceive when they believe themselves to be instruments of destiny. Rebecca Caldwell's body was discovered in her boarding house room 3 days after writing this entry. The official cause listed as heart failure, despite her youth and previous good health. The attending physician noted unusual discoloration around her lips and fingernails, consistent with certain poisons, but no further investigation was pursued after a man claiming to be a federal marshal took possession of the body. The search for the Caldwell family and the missing twins extended across multiple states but yielded no immediate results. Reported sightings came from as far away as Oregon and Texas, but none could be verified. Then, in the spring of 1891, a land transfer was recorded in northern Missouri that caught the attention of investigators. A young couple, identified as Thomas and Catherine Green, had purchased a substantial farm near the Iowa border. The description matched Isaac and Isabel, but by the time authorities arrived, the Green couple had already moved on, leaving behind a partially furnished house and freshly tilled fields. The most disturbing development came later that year, when a letter arrived at the Blackthorn Hollow Sheriff's Office, postmarked from New Orleans. To those who seek what cannot be found, your pursuit is futile. What we have set in motion cannot be stopped by mortal authorities. The circle nears completion, lacking only 3 points of convergence. The twins have fulfilled their purpose admirably, though their usefulness in their current form approaches its end. Soon they will undergo the final transformation, becoming one with the land they have gathered. Do not waste resources searching for those who joined with us in matrimonial union. They have been redistributed to serve greater purposes. Some tend distant fields, their memories washed clean like slate. Others have nourished the very soil that will soon yield the harvest of centuries. The Caldwell name is but one of many we have worn through generations. We have been gathering land since before this nation existed. The pattern repeats, the circle grows, and soon the eye will open. Look to your own homes and families, lawmen. We are closer than you believe. The letter was signed with the same strange symbol found in Jeremiah's ledger, an eye within a triangle. Analysis of the handwriting suggested it matched Margaret Caldwell's, though this could not be confirmed with absolute certainty. Following this communication, the investigation took a darker turn. Two deputies who had been particularly involved in the case died under mysterious circumstances within months of each other. Deputy Franklin Reed was found hanging from a barn rafter on his family property, though his wife insisted he had shown no signs of melancholy and that his hands were strangely positioned behind his back when she discovered him. Deputy Charles Wilson drowned in a shallow creek he had crossed hundreds of times before, his pockets inexplicably filled with heavy stones that he would have had no reason to carry. Sheriff Montgomery himself reported increasing unease as the investigation continued. In personal correspondence to a colleague in the state capital, he wrote, "I cannot shake the feeling of being observed at all hours. Twice now I've found my case notes rearranged on my desk, though my office is kept locked. Last Tuesday, I returned home to find a small triangle drawn in what appeared to be soil on my dinner plate. My wife swears no one entered the house that day. I've taken to keeping my service revolver loaded at all times." By 1892, the case had grown cold. The Caldwells remained at large, the fate of the 8 missing spouses unresolved, and the ultimate purpose of their elaborate land acquisition scheme unclear. What was clear, however, was that the family had been planning their operations for decades, beginning with the abduction of infant twins to serve as instruments in their plan. The lands acquired through the fraudulent marriages were eventually seized by the state and redistributed, though locals reported unusual difficulties with crops planted on these properties. According to agricultural records from 1893 to 1896, farms within the Caldwell Circle experienced crop failures, livestock diseases, and unexplained phenomena that defied scientific explanation of the time. His account, published in the Blackthorn Hollow Gazette, described corn that grew without kernels, merely empty husks hanging from dead stalks, and well water that ran clear by sight but left rust-colored stains on anything it touched. Most disturbing was his description of voices that seemed to emanate from the soil itself on certain nights, speaking words in no language I could identify, yet filling me with such dread that sleep became impossible. The historical record falls, largely silent on the Caldwell case after 1895. Martin Donovan, who purchased one of the former Caldwell properties in 1893, abandoned it less than a year later. Official investigations were formally closed due to lack of new evidence, though rumors and local legends continued to circulate. The most persistent of these concerned sightings of two identical figures, regardless of purported gender, observed standing motionless in fields at dusk, particularly on properties that once formed part of the Caldwell Circle. In 1920, an elderly woman in a Denver nursing home claimed to be Isabel Caldwell and provided a written statement to a visiting historical researcher. Though the account was initially dismissed as the ramblings of a senile mind, certain details aligned too closely with unreleased aspects of the case to be coincidental. We were never twins in the true sense. Isaac and I shared no blood, no birth. We were chosen for our similarities, our potential for symmetry. Father called us the perfect instruments, though Mother preferred vessels. From our earliest memories, we were taught that our bodies were merely temporary housing for something greater that would eventually inhabit us. The marriages were necessary to complete the pattern. Each property held a specific energy signature, identifiable only to those trained to sense the ancient currents that run beneath the modern world. America was built atop something older, something that slumbers still, but stirs when the correct sequence of ownership is established. The disappearances were not murders, as your histories record them. Those 8 souls were offerings, seeds planted at precise coordinates. Their bodies returned to the soil, their essences captured to feed what grows beneath. I can still recite their names in the correct order of sacrifice, a liturgy I was made to memorize before I could properly read. Father believed the completion of the land circle would open what he called the Eye of Ascension, allowing our family to transcend physical form and join with the greater consciousness that had guided our lineage for centuries. Isaac embraced this destiny with the fervor of true conviction. I harbored private doubts that eventually led to my separation from the family enterprise. I will not reveal where the others have gone, nor what became of Isaac after the transformation ritual in 1897. Some bonds transcend distance and betrayal. But know this: the circle remains incomplete by a single property. One point of convergence remains unactivated, and the Caldwell bloodline, or those who carry its purpose if not its name, continues to seek its completion. Look to where three natural waterways meet beneath a stand of lightning-struck oaks. The final property awaits its proper owner. Some plans unfold across centuries, not decades. Some families plant seeds that only their great-grandchildren will harvest. The woman died the night after providing this statement. Her body was claimed by individuals whose documentation could not be verified afterward, much like Rebecca Caldwell's remains 30 years earlier. In 1954, during construction of a new highway that bisected one of the former Caldwell properties, workers uncovered a sealed underground chamber containing artifacts that suggested ritualistic activities. Among these were 8 silver bells arranged in a circle around a central table, carved with astronomical symbols and human figures in various poses of supplication. Most disturbing was a leather-bound book whose pages were made from a material that experts reluctantly identified as human skin. The text was written in a cipher that has yet to be fully decoded, though partial translations suggest a system of belief centered around ascension through earth possession and the conjunction of blood and soil. The chamber and its contents were documented by state authorities but quickly removed to an undisclosed location. 3 of the workers involved in the discovery died within a year, one by suicide, one in a single vehicle accident, and one from a rare fungal infection that began in his lungs after reportedly inhaling dust from the chamber. Professor Harold Jenkins of the University of Iowa's Department of Anthropology conducted interviews throughout the 1960s with elderly residents who had lived in the affected counties during the Caldwell incident. His unpublished manuscript, Agrarian Cults and Land Worship in the American Midwest, drew connections between the Caldwell case and earlier European traditions of earth worship that may have been brought to America by specific immigrant groups. What makes the Caldwell case particularly significant, Jenkins wrote, is not merely the criminal methodology, which was admittedly ingenious, but the underlying belief system that appears to have motivated it. The pattern of land acquisition, when mapped against geological and hydrological features of the region, suggests knowledge of subsurface structures and energy lines that predates modern geophysical understanding. The symbolic eye at the center of their property circle corresponds to a natural formation of intersecting underground water sources that creates unusual electromagnetic readings, even with contemporary equipment. Most disturbing is the possibility that the Caldwells were merely one cell of a larger organization spanning generations and geography. My research has identified at least 3 similar cases between 1840 and 1920. Each involving the strategic acquisition of land in patterns that, when mapped, create specific geometric forms. In each case, disappearances accompanied the land transfers, and in each case, the perpetrators evaded final justice. Jenkins discontinued his research abruptly in 1969 after reportedly receiving a package containing soil and a small silver bell. He resigned his academic position and relocated to New Mexico, refusing all further communication regarding his work. The lands once owned by the Caldwells through their fraudulent marriages have changed hands many times over the decades. Agricultural productivity on these properties has remained notably below average, despite modern farming techniques and technologies. Aerial surveys conducted in the 1980s revealed that when viewed from above, subtle differences in soil coloration and crop growth still faintly outlined the circular pattern documented in Jeremiah Caldwell's ledger. In 2010, a geological survey team investigating groundwater patterns in eastern Iowa reported unusual findings at several sites corresponding to the Caldwell properties. Core samples revealed soil stratification inconsistent with the surrounding area, including a layer at approximately 6 feet deep that contained organic material with DNA that could not be fully classified within known taxonomies. The study was discontinued after its funding was unexpectedly withdrawn. Most recently, in 2020, a descendant of Thomas Whitfield, the land registry clerk who first uncovered the Caldwell scheme, reported receiving an anonymous letter containing a family photograph from the 1890s. The picture showed a family of 4, an older couple and 2 young adults who appeared identical despite being dressed as male and female. On the back was written a simple message: "The circle lacks but one point. The eye prepares to open." The 7th generation approaches readiness. Local law enforcement dismissed the letter as a prank, but the recipient noted that the handwriting matched samples of Jeremiah Caldwell's writing preserved in historical records. The question remains: what became of the Caldwell family and their stolen twins? Did their land acquisition scheme serve some darker purpose beyond mere wealth accumulation? And perhaps most disturbingly, if Isabel's nursing home confession held any truth, does some remnant of their organization continue to operate, patiently working across generations toward the completion of their mysterious circle? In the quiet farming communities of eastern Iowa, some older residents still refuse to purchase property that once belonged to the Caldwell Circle. Some claim that on certain nights, particularly during harvest moons, 2 identical figures can be seen standing in those fields, their genders indeterminate, their faces expressionless as they survey the land their actions helped to gather over a century ago. The case of the Caldwell twins remains one of America's most disturbing examples of systematic manipulation, not only of land records and legal systems, but of human beings themselves. Children raised from infancy to serve as instruments in a scheme whose true purpose may extend beyond simple greed into realms of belief and practice modern minds hesitate to contemplate. For those living near the former Caldwell properties, the legacy of that family's actions continues to cast a long shadow. Local farmer Benjamin Harper, interviewed for this account, offered this observation: "My grandfather told me never to walk the north corner of our property after sunset, said nothing good grows from seeds the Caldwells planted. I thought he meant it metaphorically until I found those strange formations in the soil, perfect concentric circles that appear overnight and can't be explained by any natural phenomenon. Sometimes I think I hear voices coming from that direction at dusk, always the same words repeated: the circle nears completion." As with many historical horrors, perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Caldwell case is not what is known, but what remains hidden, buried in archives, in soil, and in the collective memory of a region that has never fully recovered from a crime whose true scope may never be fully understood. If you find yourself traveling through eastern Iowa, particularly in the counties surrounding Blackthorn Hollow, pay attention to the land itself. Some locals say you can still identify former Caldwell properties by the quality of silence that surrounds them, an unnatural stillness that settles over fields where nothing quite grows as it should, where birds refuse to sing, and where, on certain nights when the moon hangs heavy in the sky, the soil itself seems to shift and breathe with a purpose all its own. Remember, evil rarely vanishes completely. It merely changes form, adapts, and waits for the right conditions to flourish once again. Perhaps the most terrifying possibility is not that the Caldwells disappeared, but that they achieved exactly what they intended, a transformation beyond our understanding, a merger with the very land they so methodically gathered. Only God and Jesus Christ can protect us from such ancient evils that continue to lurk beneath the surface of our modern world. Let us pray that whatever dark purpose the Caldwell family pursued remains forever unfulfilled. The investigation into the Caldwell family might have remained buried in historical archives had it not been for the discovery made in 2022 by Dr. Abigail Montgomery, a descendant of the original Sheriff Montgomery who had pursued the case. While clearing out her great-grandfather's attic in preparation for selling the family home, she discovered a hidden compartment containing documents that had been deliberately concealed for over a century. Among these papers was a map matching the one described in Jeremiah Caldwell's ledger, showing the circular pattern of acquired properties. Most significantly, the map had been updated with pencil markings showing land transfers as recently as 2015. Someone had been tracking the continued execution of the Caldwell plan for generations. I initially thought it was just my great-grandfather's obsession with an unsolved case, Dr. Montgomery explained in a private interview. Then I noticed the different types of ink and pencil markings dating from different eras. Multiple people had maintained this record over decades, and the most recent additions were made in the last decade. The most disturbing discovery was a series of photographs paperclipped to the back of the map. The earliest, from 1890, showed the Caldwell twins standing expressionless beside their parents. The next, from 1920, showed two young adults with the same vacant expression and eerily similar features. Then another from 1950, 1980, and finally 2010, each showing a pair of identical individuals who, while not the same people, bore the same distinctive facial structure and empty gaze that had characterized Isaac and Isabel. It wasn't genetic inheritance, Dr. Montgomery concluded after extensive research. These were carefully selected pairs, chosen for their physical similarities and placed in positions to continue the work of land acquisition. The Caldwell family wasn't defined by blood, but by purpose. Her investigation led her to county records, showing that in the last 30 years, 23 properties in eastern Iowa had been purchased by different individuals who, upon closer examination, appeared to be operating in coordinated pairs. These modern twins used legitimate business fronts rather than fraudulent marriages, but the pattern of acquisition remained consistent with the original Caldwell circle. Dr. Montgomery's research partner, Professor Daniel Harper, from the University of Iowa, made a breakthrough when he overlaid the property map with geological survey data. The properties form a perfect circle around what appears to be a natural formation called a telluric energy node, a junction point of underground electromagnetic currents. These were often sites of indigenous ceremonial grounds before European settlement. The science is just catching up to what certain ancient cultures understood intuitively. Their investigation took a dark turn in April 2023 when they received an unmarked envelope containing soil samples and a brief note. The final property will soon be acquired. The circle completes this generation. You are invited to witness what your ancestor could not stop. Despite warnings from colleagues, Montgomery and Harper decided to conduct nighttime surveillance of the last property, the Harper family farm, which Daniel had recently inherited. According to local legend, this was the convergence point mentioned in historical records, where 3 underground streams met beneath a grove of lightning-scarred oak trees. On the night of June 21st, the summer solstice, they observed 2 figures entering the property from different directions. Using night vision equipment, they recorded the following. From Professor Harper's field notes, 2 subjects, appearing physically identical despite being dressed in different clothing, arrived at the oak grove at precisely midnight. They carried what looked like surveying equipment, but instead of taking measurements, they placed metal rods at specific points, forming a smaller circle within the grove. The subjects then positioned themselves on opposite sides of this circle and began what appeared to be a synchronized ritual movement. Most disturbing was what happened to the ground between them. The soil appeared to ripple like water, and a faint luminescence rose from the earth itself. Our equipment malfunctioned at this point, but before the camera failed, it captured what looked like a vertical opening in the air between the two figures. Not a light or projection, but what I can only describe as a thinning of reality itself. The recording ended abruptly, and when police responded to Dr. Montgomery's emergency call 30 minutes later, they found the oak grove undisturbed, with no evidence of the reported activity. The metal rods were gone, and soil samples taken from the site showed no abnormalities. Professor Harper, however, was found wandering 2 miles away, disoriented and unable to account for his movements after the camera failed. He reported only fragmented memories. "I remember the ground opening, not like an earthquake, more like the soil became permeable like water, and something was looking back at us from below. Not a physical eye, but a consciousness that suddenly became aware of our observation." 3 days after the incident, Dr. Montgomery received a final communication, a letter written in handwriting that forensic analysis later confirmed matched samples of Isabel Caldwell's writing from the 1890s, despite being physically impossible. "What you witnessed was merely preparation, not completion. The circle has been maintained across 5 generations, waiting for the correct celestial alignment. The grandchildren of the grandchildren continue the work begun before your nation existed. The twins are not individuals, but vessels, carrying forward a purpose that transcends human lifespans. Your ancestor could not stop us because he could not comprehend our true design. Land ownership is merely the legal mechanism. The true power lies in the ritual connection established through continuous occupation and attention. The eye opens not to destroy, but to transform. The Caldwell name is long abandoned, but the Caldwell purpose continues. We have worn many names, inhabited many forms. What you call possession, we call continuity. What you call obsession, we call devotion. The final convergence approaches with the next lunar eclipse. You are welcome to observe, but you cannot interfere. Some patterns, once set in motion, complete themselves regardless of human intervention. Dr. Montgomery shared this information with federal authorities, who established surveillance of the Harper farm in anticipation of the lunar eclipse, scheduled for November 3rd, 2023. What happened that night remains heavily classified, though local residents reported unusual atmospheric phenomena, including what some described as the Northern Lights, but in circular patterns directly above the old oak grove. 3 weeks after the eclipse, both Dr. Montgomery and Professor Harper disappeared without explanation. Their research materials were confiscated by individuals claiming federal authority, though subsequent inquiries revealed no record of such an operation being officially sanctioned. The Harper farm was sold at auction to Helix Agricultural Enterprises, a corporate entity that, upon investigation, appeared to have been incorporated just 1 month prior to the purchase. The company's listed directors could not be located for comment, and the property now sits behind newly installed security fencing with no apparent agricultural activity taking place. Most disturbing of all was the discovery made by a local journalist who managed to obtain satellite imagery of the property taken 6 months after the eclipse. The photographs showed that the topography of the land had changed. The oak grove now stood at the center of a perfect circular depression approximately 100 feet in diameter. At the center of this depression, visible only from above, was a formation in the soil that resembled a giant eye. Environmental sensors placed at the property boundary by concerned researchers have detected unusual fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, radiation levels that periodically spike beyond normal background levels, and what one scientist described as temporal anomalies, discrepancies in atomic clock measurements taken at the site compared to control locations. Local residents report seeing identical twins walking the perimeter of the property at dusk, always at the same pace, always maintaining the same distance from each other, always silent. Attempts to photograph these individuals have universally failed, with cameras malfunctioning or capturing only blurred images that defy enhancement. From the journal of Sarah Jenkins, high school student and neighbor to the former Harper farm, dated July 2024. I saw them again last night, walking the fence line exactly 20 feet apart from each other. I tried to take a video, but my phone died instantly, despite being at 87% battery. The weird thing isn't just that they look identical, it's that they move in perfect synchronization, like they're connected by invisible strings. When one turns their head, the other does too, at exactly the same angle and speed. Mum says to stay away from that place, that there's always been stories about the Caldwell lands. But I'm not sure distance matters anymore. Last week, I found a perfect circle of that weird, iridescent soil on our front lawn. The same stuff that's been spreading from the old Harper place. Dad tried to remove it, but it was back the next morning. The birds avoid our property now. The insects have gone silent at night, and sometimes when I look out my bedroom window toward the old oak grove, I swear I can see the ground itself pulsing, like it's breathing, not heaving up and down, but rippling from the center outward, like something down there is finally waking up. The twins saw me watching yesterday. They stopped at the exact same moment and turned their heads, not toward me, but toward each other. Then they smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, because it wasn't a human expression at all. It was like watching masks crack open to reveal something else looking out. Dad says we're moving next month. He says it's for his new job, but I heard him and Mum talking last night. They found soil from the Harper farm in my bed, arranged in a perfect circle on my pillow, even though I haven't been anywhere near that property. Inside the circle was a small silver bell that rang by itself when Mom tried to pick it up. I don't think moving will help. The Caldwells, or whatever they call themselves now, have been patient for generations. What's another few miles to something that thinks in terms of centuries? Sarah Jenkins and her family relocated to Colorado in August 2024. 3 months later, they reported finding identical twins living in the house directly across from their new home. The Jenkins family has not been heard from since. The properties that once formed the Caldwell Circle are now all owned by subsidiaries of Helix Agricultural Enterprises. Satellite imagery shows that crops planted within this circle exhibit unusual growth patterns, forming intricate geometric designs visible only from above. Soil samples smuggled out from these properties show elevated levels of unidentified organic compounds and trace elements not typically found in Iowa farmland. Freedom of Information Act requests regarding federal involvement at the Harper farm have been denied on grounds of national security implications. What began in 1890 as an investigation into fraudulent marriages and disappearances has evolved across generations into something far more disturbing. The possibility that the Caldwell family's true purpose was not merely the acquisition of land, but the completion of a ritual spanning centuries, culminating in our present moment. Official inquiries into these phenomena have been consistently redirected or closed without explanation. The final words from Dr. Montgomery's last recorded journal entry perhaps best summarize the lingering questions this case presents. What if the Caldwells were never the instigators, but merely servants of something older? What if the twins, all the twins across generations, were being prepared not as perpetrators but as vessels? The land doesn't belong to them, they belong to the land or to whatever dwells beneath it, and now, after more than 130 years of patient work, the circle is complete, the eye is open, and it sees us all. For those who value their peace of mind, perhaps it is best to avoid eastern Iowa's back roads, particularly at dusk, when the boundaries between worlds grow thin. If you should find yourself near properties once owned by the Caldwell Circle, be wary of identical figures walking in perfect synchronization. And above all, do not answer if you hear the delicate ringing of a silver bell emerging from the soil itself. In these uncertain times, when ancient evils stir beneath the surface of our modern world, remember that faith provides our strongest shield. Only through God and Jesus Christ can we find protection from forces that have waited patiently across generations, forces that view human lives as mere moments in plans that unfold across centuries. Pray that the eye that has opened in Iowa may yet be closed before whatever it has awakened fully emerges into our world.